Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the annual CMF Clearinghouse webinar. My name is Karen Scurry, and I work with Federal Highway Administration's Headquarters Office of Safety. I'm the Federal Highway Manager for the CMF Clearinghouse, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar. We're excited to see so many of you logged on today to better understand the upcoming CMF rating transition and explore real-world applications of CMF. We have a full agenda for today's webinar. We always like to start with an overview of CMFs and the CMF Clearinghouse, since we have such a diverse range of participants. I'll try to keep that brief so that we can spend as much time as possible on our three featured presentations. So our featured presentations today include Taha Saleem, who will be giving an update on the CMF Clearinghouse rating transition. Taha is with the University of North Carolina's Highway Safety Research Center and manages the day-to-day operations of the CMF Clearinghouse for Federal Highway. This transition is a big change for the CMF Clearinghouse, and we want to make sure that everyone is aware of what's going on and what to expect in the coming months. And our goal is to minimize our impact to all of you, and so we want to make sure that we're communicating this change very clearly to you. Our other two presenters will focus on real-world applications of CMF. We'll hear from Troy Bucko on how Caltrans is incorporating data-driven safety analysis in traffic impact studies, and then Srinivas Geetapalli from TTI will talk about the process that they use to assist TxDOT in the review and development of CMFs for highway safety improvement projects in Texas. So before we get started, I'd just like to cover a couple of housekeeping items. I know we've all experienced some sort of technical difficulties with webinars over this past year. We are hoping that everything goes smoothly today. But if for some reason your computer or web browser freezes during the webinar, just reload the website and log back into the program. You should be able to rejoin the session with no problem. We have muted all of your audio for the webinar today. We do expect a large number of attendees on the call, so muting your audio helps us to cut down on any confusion and background noise. And then as an attendee, you have a control panel in the upper right corner of your screen that collapses and expands by clicking the red arrow. Although you will be muted, you'll have the ability to ask questions by entering them in the chat, by entering them in the question box, which is located within the control panel. You can ask questions during the presentations as we go along by typing them into that box, and then we'll answer those questions at the end of all of the presentations today. If you have any problem during the webinar, you can also enter that here. We'll be monitoring those questions, and we'll try to help you the best we can if you are having any problems. Lastly, I did want to let you know that we are recording today's webinar, and the plan is to post that recording as well as the PowerPoint presentations to the CMF Clearinghouse website in the next couple of weeks. And so before we get started with the presentations today, I wanted to get you all warmed up with a quick poll question to help us gauge the number of people that are attending today's webinar. So Kelly, if you can bring that poll question up. Is the poll open, Kelly?
Yes, Karen, it's open right now.
Okay, I can't see it, so. So Kelly or Taha, I don't know if maybe you can report out on what we're seeing in the poll since I can't see it.
Looks like we have 95% of folks have just one participant today, 2% have 3 to 5 participants, and 6 to 10 participants, and we have one with 11 to 20 participants.
That's great. We're so excited to see so many people join us for today's webinar. We had a record number of registrations, and we've been doing this for 11 years. So I think that's good that there's so much interest in crash modification factors. Okay, so thank you all for responding to that poll question. We're going to jump into a quick overview of CMF and the Clearinghouse before we get into the details of the transition. So first, let's review what is a crash modification factor. A CMF is a multiplicative factor that reflects the expected safety effectiveness of a countermeasure. CMFs are most commonly used to estimate the expected number of crashes after implementing a given countermeasure at a specific site or even a group of sites. A CMF that is less than 1 indicates that you should expect a decrease in crashes. So the example shown here shows that a CMF of 0.8 represents a 20% reduction in the number of crashes. If the CMF is 1, that means that you should not expect to see any changes in crashes from implementing that countermeasure. And then if the CMF is greater than 1, that indicates that you might expect to see an increase in crashes. So the example shows a CMF of 1.2 represents a 20% increase in the number of crashes. The CMF Clearinghouse maintains all available CMFs in a regularly updated online repository or database. We scour the literature on a quarterly basis to identify newly published CMFs, and the Clearinghouse provides a mechanism for us to easily share that information back out with all of you. When we started the Clearinghouse in 2009, there were about 3,000 star-rated CMFs in the Clearinghouse, and now we have more than 7,000 star-rated CMFs in the Clearinghouse. In addition to the database of CMFs, the Clearinghouse also includes educational information on using CMFs, developing CMFs, and other related topics. So if you've not explored that part of the Clearinghouse, I would encourage you to take a look at those resources as well. So we have another poll question for you here. I'm going to assume that because you're all here, you use the CMF Clearinghouse in some capacity, but we'd like to get a better feel for how often you use this resource. So if you could just respond to the poll and indicate whether or not you are a super user and use the CMF Clearinghouse on a daily basis. Maybe you access the Clearinghouse weekly or monthly, or perhaps you only visit the Clearinghouse quarterly when we add new CMFs, or maybe you only use the CMF Clearinghouse on a rare occasion. I know for me, it's probably weekly, and then within that week, it might even be daily, depending on what's going on. So Kelly, I think I'm going to need your help again to summarize what we're seeing here.
Sure. So it looks like the majority of folks use it monthly, quarterly, or rarely. We had 0% daily, 14% weekly, 29% monthly, 26% quarterly, and 30% rarely. Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. I think that's helpful for us to see how you all use the Clearinghouse. And I think that what I have planned over the next couple of minutes is just to show you some of the features that are available in the Clearinghouse, and especially for those folks that don't use it as often, this might be helpful to you and maybe will increase your usage of the Clearinghouse in the future. So earlier this year, we gave the CMF Clearinghouse a facelift. So some of our regular users might have figured out that it's still the same CMF Clearinghouse that we all know of, just with a little different look and feel. From the home page here, you can search for a CMF by entering your search term in the text box at the top of the screen. So I'm not sure if you can see the little arrow that I'm trying to highlight here. And then you can search by countermeasure name, study citation, author, or CMF ID by selecting your search criteria from that drop-down box. We've also compiled some preset searches based on terms that are most commonly searched for in the Clearinghouse. So right under that search box, you can see the frequent searches for roundabout, signal, pedestrian, shoulder, and TSMO. And so if you select one of those, that will return search results for that term. We also have an option for you to explore or download all of the 7,000 plus CMFs in the Clearinghouse by selecting this Browse All option. And so with 7,000 plus CMFs in the Clearinghouse, that's a lot of information to weed through. And very often you might search for a term and get a lot of search results. And so there are several ways that you can narrow down those search results. The first way is to simply use more keywords. So the example here shows that if we enter the keyword edgeline, we get 420 CMFs returned. But if we just add another keyword and clarify maybe that we're looking for CMFs related to edgeline width, that narrows the results down to 54 CMFs, which is much more manageable. The second option that we have to narrow down your search results is to use the filters on the search results page. So we're still working with our 420 CMFs here.
that were returned for Edgeline. And you can see on the left-hand side of that search results page that there are filters. So you can filter by star rating, crash type or severity, roadway characteristics, and even whether or not the CMF is in the first edition of the Highway Safety Manual. And so this shows you that if you're only interested in the 4 and 5 star rated CMFs, that will give you about 116 CMFs in your filtered down to. You can also filter by crash type. So if you're only interested in CMFs targeted at runoff road crashes, you can filter by runoff road crashes and narrow those search results down to 235. And then if you're only interested in CMFs that target fatal and serious injury crashes, you can filter by crash severity as well. So there are many ways that you can filter down the search results. Another tool that we have available in the Clearinghouse is what we call our comparison tool to help you shop for the most appropriate CMFs. And so this probably happens after you narrow your search results a little bit and you're taking a closer look at the CMFs that are available for each countermeasure. And so for the example shown here, you can see that we have 2 CMFs that are different, but in all other areas, they look almost identical. And so you might be wondering, well, what is the difference? And so you can check the box to the left of the CMF value and select the compare button. And the CMF Clearinghouse will compare side by side up to 4 CMFs and show you through this blue highlight what is different. And so for these 2 CMFs, you can see that one is for stop controlled and the other is for signalized. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on is the CMF details page. So for those of you that use the Clearinghouse, you know that we try to capture as much information as possible in the CMF Clearinghouse, but we are limited to what information is available in the study. And in many cases, we may not be able to give you a full picture of the study or site characteristics based on the fields that we capture in the CMF Clearinghouse. And so I would always encourage you to review the full study for additional context. We provide the link when those studies are publicly available. As you can see here, we have a link to the study page for each CMS. Or you can always reach out to the study author or request the help of your DOT or university librarian to help track down the study if it's not publicly available. Every CMF also has a CMF ID, which is located here at the top of the page, as well as in the website URL. You can use this to cite CMFs if you are using them for a particular analysis. And I would encourage you to get in the habit of doing this, especially with the upcoming transition. Every CMF also includes the star rating, and Taha will get into a lot more detail about what that star rating means now and then what it will mean in the future with the transition. But this basically reflects the quality of the study that produced the CMF. We also include the standard error for every crash modification factor when that is available. And I can't emphasize enough that the CMF is just a point estimate, and the standard error can be used to estimate the range of expected effectiveness for that countermeasure. So I would encourage you to look, to use that standard error so that you can have a good understanding of what the outcome might be, that full range of expected effectiveness. The details page also includes information about the applicability of the CMF. And so it's important to ensure that the conditions of the study that develop the crash modification factor are similar to your site of interest. And so a countermeasure might perform differently if you're in a rural or urban area or a stop control or signalized intersection, as we saw in the previous example. So it's really important to ensure that the details of the CMF you're looking at match the details of the site that you're considering using the CMF for. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is the comments field. This is way at the bottom of the CMF details page and may get overlooked, but this is a field that we use to communicate to you any important information that we find about a study during the review. So I would just encourage you to take a look at that comments field and see if we flagged anything for you to pay particular attention to related to that study. If you need any more information about CMFs and the CMF Clearinghouse, I would encourage you to review the Clearinghouse user guide and supplemental video tutorials. They can be accessed from the CMF Clearinghouse website under that first About CMF Clearinghouse tab. It should be the first link down under that tab. And then just to wrap things up for this overview, I just wanted to, remind you that CMFs are often used to make funding investment decisions, either comparing project alternatives or prioritizing projects based on benefit cost analysis. And so we want to be sure that we're selecting a CMF that best matches our conditions and applying it correctly. And the CMF Clearinghouse team is available to provide technical assistance if you need any help explaining CMFs that are on the site or from a study report or even applying CMFs. So if you do need any help, I would encourage you to reach out to us. If you have any questions for me, you can enter them in the chat pod, and we will get to those at the end of the webinar today. And then before I turn it over to Taha, I had one more poll question for you. Kelly, if you can bring that up. We wanted to get some input on how, learn a little bit more about how you use CMS. So if you can respond to this poll and tell us what processes or analyses you use CMFs in. You can select all that apply, or you should be able to select all that apply. And of course, if you use CMFs in another way, you can provide that information in the chat pod. We'd love to hear how you're using CMFs. Kelly, you want to summarize what we're seeing here?
We have 46% funding applications, 54% system level or project level planning, 78% for alternatives analysis, 62% for design decisions, and 34% for operations analysis.
That's great. Okay. Well, thank you all for responding to that poll. We appreciate your responses, and it's good to see that you're using CMS in many different ways. Thank you. And so with that, I think now I'm going to turn it over to Taha so he can talk to you in a little bit more detail about the upcoming CMF rating transition.
Okay, Karen, and I'm just going to start sharing my screen here quickly. Oops, maybe I made a mistake here. Just 1 second, guys. Kelly, can you confirm that you can see my slideshow?
I can see your slideshow. It's in presentation. It's not in presentation mode.
Okay. And now?
Not yet. No.
No. Okay. Kelly, maybe you'll have to make me the presenter again to fix this thing. I might have made a mistake, so I can change it over. And then I'll change it back to myself. Okay. And now I think it should be fine now.
It looks the same. We can see it. It's just we can see the next slide as well.
Okay, let me see. Okay, now? Is it good now, Kelly?
Nothing is pulling up now for me.
Okay, so this is something. Let me just, sorry guys, let me just get this fixed up quickly here. Okay, and okay, let me know when you can see it, the right thing. Can you see the right thing now?
Perfect. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Sorry guys for the small problem. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Taha Saleem, and I work for the UNC Highway Safety Research Center, and I also manage the CMF Clearinghouse on behalf of Federal Highway. So today, as Karen talked earlier, I will be talking about the upcoming CMF Clearinghouse rating transition. So before we go ahead, I would like to start the poll question, and you should see the poll question pulling up shortly on your screen. The question is, are you aware that the CMF Clearinghouse will transition to the new rating criteria next year? And you have three options here: yes, no, and not sure. So Kelly, were you able to pull the poll out? Yeah, I see that now. So it looks like the majority of you were not aware that the clearinghouse will transition to a new system. Currently, we're showing about 57% of you are not aware, and about 37% of you are showing yes, that you're aware. And we also have, I think, about 7% that we're not sure. Okay, so I think that's one of the reasons why we are here presenting this to you. Wait. Kelly, can you see my screen properly still? My view changed somehow.
Yeah, we see it right.
Beautiful. Yeah, as I was saying, that's one of the reasons, so for the 57% of you that you were not sure or unaware of this transition to the new rating criteria next year, that's why we are here presenting to you on this topic today. So I would like to begin my presentation by giving you all a brief description on the CMF rating system changes. So just to recap, an updated rating system for CMFs has been developed as part of the NCHRP Project 17-72. The main purpose of NCHRP Project 17-72 was to update the rating and inclusion process for CMFs for the second edition of the Highway Safety Manual. And with this, we have also been working on updating the CMF Clearinghouse rating system to be consistent with the 1772 rating scheme. Now, before we dig deep into the rating system changes, let's talk briefly about the current CMF star rating system. So currently, we use a single rating scheme to rate the CMFs developed from either before-after cross-sectional meta-analysis or meta-regression studies. And that scheme is based on 5 criteria, which include the study design, sample size, standard error, the biases, and the data sources. So in this rating scheme, study design and sample size are given a weight of 2, whereas all the other criteria carry a weight of 1. And points are assigned to each criteria based on the level of rigor, where an excellent would equate to 2 points, a fair rating would equate to 1 point, and a poor rating would equate to 0 points. And the overall score is then calculated using the formula that you can see on the slide. As you can see, this accounts for the weight of 2 given to study design and sample size. And the maximum number of possible points based on this formula that the CMF can get are 14. And the table you see here shows the conversion from the 14-point scale to the star ratings. And as you can see, to get a 5-star rating, a study must check all the boxes to receive the maximum possible 14 points. And a CMF that receives, say, only half the points, that would be 7, would receive a rating of 3 stars. And as you go further down, we can see, a CMF that's not very well developed, and scores only 1 to 2 points will only get a 1-star rating. Similarly, if it only gets between 3 to 6 points, it will only get a 2-star rating. So based on this current rating system, we have very few 5-star CMFs in the clearinghouse. And the main reason being, to be a 5-star CMF, a study must include multiple states to get the full points for the data source. If they're not using multiple states in the CMF development, the study will likely get a maximum of 13 points, and as such, won't have the 14 points needed to get a 5-star rating. Now, just to let you know about the score details in the CMF Clearinghouse. So when you search for a CMF on the CMF Clearinghouse, you can see the star ratings on the search result page. However, if you click on the CMF to go to the CMF details page, as Karen mentioned in her presentation earlier, you will see an option to the right beside the star rating that says View Score Details. And if you click on this View Score Detail link, it will open a new mini window, and that will describe how the CMF scored in each of the 5 criteria. So for example, in the example that I've shown in the slide, it's a 5-star CMF. If I click the View Score Details, you can see that all the 5 criteria, the study design, the sample size, the standard error, the potential bias, and the data source scored excellent, which means, it led to maximum 14 points. And as such, the CMF got a 5-star rating. So now that we have talked briefly about the current CMF star rating system and how you can access the score details, let's talk about what is different in the rating system developed by the NCHRP 17-72. So the rating system that's developed by NCHRP 17-72 is much more detailed and provides scores for different factors, including study design, sample size, methodology, and significance. And there's a separate rating criteria for CMFs developed using before-after, cross-sectional, meta-analysis, and meta-regression studies. So for each of these different factors, there are multiple levels within those different factors, and points are assigned for each level, and for a total score that can be calculated to be 150 points maximum. So when we talk about the system, the ratings for the before, after, and cross-sectional studies, they consider the factors including sample size, study design, methodology, and the standard errors of the CMF to determine the significance. When we talk about factors that are considered for meta-analysis and meta-regression studies, they include factors such as data, methodology, the individual CMF quality, the appropriateness of combining CMFs, the statistical significance, and the appropriateness of the analysis. Now, before we move further into what the new rating system means for the star ratings, let's talk about our transition plan and where we stand currently. So we have divided the activities for this rating transition into both internal-facing and external-facing activities. And in this slide, you can see the internal-facing activities. So the internal-facing activities consist of developing a method to provide star ratings based on the new point system. So we are currently awaiting final approval on the convergence scale, which we will talk more about in the next slides. And the remaining internal-facing activities included expanding the database to accommodate the new fields and to revise the user input forms in the admin section of the website, both of which have been completed. The external-facing activities in the transition plan consist of 5 different tasks. The first of the tasks was to hold stakeholder calls to better understand how the new ratings would impact the field of safety, practice, and research. This task is complete. We had our stakeholder calls earlier in this year, where we were able to get some constructive feedback, from the stakeholders. The remaining 4 tasks are all ongoing. The first of which is to develop outreach materials. Now, when we talk about the outreach materials, we already developed the advanced outreach flyer announcing the change, and that flyer is available right now currently on the CMF Clearinghouse website. And it was also sent to our mailing list. So if you have subscribed to our mailing list, you should have also received it in your mails as well. It was, I think, earlier in November. And we are currently working on a detailed flyer and a short video explaining in detail, what's going to change and how. And we're expecting those to come out soon. So similarly, we have also been working behind the scenes to revise the website display to accommodate the new rating criteria. And we are also revising the CMF Clearinghouse user guide. And the last of the external-facing activities is conducting webinars to explain the new rating system to the users. So today's webinar is the first in the cycle, and we will have more webinars scheduled closer to the transition date. In fact, you will have a question in the post-webinar evaluation survey today, and we will be using that question to gauge your interest in participating in those webinars that we will hold closer to the transition date. So now that we have talked about the transition plan, let's talk about discussing how the 1772 ratings will be converted to star ratings. Oops, sorry. So as I discussed previously, in the previous slides, the rating system developed by NCHRP 17-72 allows for a maximum score of 150. And the following table shows. Yep, Karen.
So you're not on that. Oh, there you go. Oh, it keeps switching back and forth for me.
Let me just check. Do something.
Okay, I think you're good.
Is it good now?
I think so.
I'm sorry, yeah, my computer is acting up at the wrong time, Anyways, so if it's all fine, I can continue. So yeah, so as we discussed in the previous slides, guys, the rating system developed by NCHRP 17-72 allows for a maximum score of 150. And the following table that you can see, on the slide, it shows our proposed conversion scale. So where a CMF that would score between 135 to 150 points will get a 5-star rating. And a CMF would need at least half the points, that is 75, to get a 3-star rating. Now, one thing I want to note here that this proposed conversion scale is still awaiting final approval and is still subject to change. So based on this conversion scale, we have put together this table that shows how the current star-rated CMFs will fare under our proposed under the proposed new system. So of course, there will be changes in the ratings, with some CMFs being rated higher while the others will be rated lower. So as can be seen in this table, you can see in the top left corner, around a total of 114 CMFs that are currently rated 4 stars or higher will be rated 2 stars or lower in the new rating system. And similarly, if you see at the bottom right corner of the table, around 15 CMFs that are currently rated 2 stars or lower will now be rated 4 stars under the new system. And I would again want to affirm that this conversion criteria that I'm presenting here is still awaiting final approval and still subject to change. So as you saw in the table, on the previous slide, the conversion scale will lead to many CMFs being rated differently from the current ratings in the clearinghouse. So we estimate that around 52% of the CMFs currently in the clearinghouse would maintain their current star ratings, while around 16% of the CMFs that are currently rated 3 stars or better would be rated 2 stars or lower. Now, with respect to the transition timeline, the exact launch date for the transition is still unknown, but it will likely occur towards the end of the first quarter of 2021. And rest assured, the CMF Clearinghouse team is actively working behind the scenes to ensure a smooth transition for all of you. And we will continue to provide additional details regarding the transition in the coming months. Now, I believe a lot of you would have questions about what happens post the rating transition. So post the transition, the CMF ratings in the clearinghouse will continue to be presented in a form of 5-star scale, using the conversion scale that I presented in the previous slides, along with the total score calculated using the NCHRP 17-72 rating criteria. Now, I think it's again. Now, ratings for all the current CMFs will be converted to reflect the new rating criteria following the rating system transition. Now, as we see on the previous slides, the conversion scale will lead to many CMFs being rated differently from their current ratings in the CMF Clearinghouse. And to minimize the impact of these changes, the CMF Clearinghouse will provide users with a spreadsheet consisting of both the old and new star ratings for the CMFs that are currently present in the CMF Clearinghouse for a period of time after the transition. So you should all be able to go into the clearinghouse and download a spreadsheet and compare the old ratings versus the new ratings based on the CMF IDs for the CMFs you are looking at. Now, talking about how you can prepare for the transition, the first thing you should know that the CMFs that are added to the clearinghouse after the rating transition would only show the ratings based on the new criteria. The spreadsheet that we were talking about in the previous slide, will only record the old and new ratings for the CMFs up to the point of transition. Anything post-transition, we will only rate using the new criteria and not the old criteria. So to minimize impacts on your work, you should continue to record CMF IDs for the CMFs that you are currently using. Also, for the state DOTs, we would recommend that you update your state CMF lists following the rating transition to reflect the new rating criteria. And we also ask you to continue to check the dedicated changes ahead page that we have that's now available on the CMF Clearinghouse website for up-to-date information on this rating transition. And the changes ahead page, is linked on is available. If you go on the home page on the Clearinghouse website, it's available in one of the feature boxes, or you can also go to the page using the link that is shown in this slide. So that was all that I had, describing the rating transition. For the question and answers, you can please enter your questions in the GoToWebinar question window, and we will address them after all the presentations collectively. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. And I think now, Kelly, we can transition to Troy.
Thank you. I'll get my screen switched over here. And just want to confirm you can see my screen on your viewing window?
Yes, Troy, I can see it.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on which part of the coast you're on. My name is Troy Bucko, and I'm with the California Department of Transportation, Division of Safety Programs. And just I want to set the stage here a little bit. Caltrans has gone through a kind of revision in our structure recently, where our safety program used to be part of our traffic operations branch. And we recently separated the safety program out of that, and it's been created into a new division within the department. And that division reports directly to the Director of Transportation. So we've really elevated safety within the department, and one of the focuses of that elevation is looking at safety in everything we do, and that includes land development and intergovernmental review projects as well, which we'll be discussing today. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a brief outline. We've restructured the way we do these reviews, so I think it's kind of important to understand some of that background as well first. So I'm going to briefly touch on what our role is in the California Environmental Quality Act, what's new for us as far as safety analysis perspective in LD/IGR reviews, and then also how we're going to be using CMFs in the LD/IGR review process with our staff and with lead agencies and with developers as well. So basically under CEQA, because this may vary from state to state, our state specifically has requirements on specific things we need to look at. But we need to look at basically things that are addressing or conflicting with transit, roadway use, bicycles, and pedestrian facilities primarily. Our current existing leadership in government has a very pro-development perspective. And so sometimes safety can be viewed by a developer as kind of impeding their growth or their ability to do a project. And so we've kind of had some different changes with the law and how we look at safety, but also how we look at development in general. Since we have a huge need for housing and there's a big push in government to increase that production rate throughout the state. But we also want to make sure that we're maintaining, our geometric design features and safety and those types of things within those projects as well as they come in for review. So the new Senate Bill 73, which is an update to our CEQA law, basically has that we're supposed to look at the typical things, noise, air pollution, and safety concerns are supposed to be addressed within the CEQA process or the review process for that development. One of the issues comes up though is actually the role that the agency, Caltrans, has in that process. So Caltrans is just a commenting agency. So when a local land use developer comes in, they would go to the local government, which is typically the lead agency. And they're the ones that are going to be reviewing and approving that project. So if there's not a direct change to our facility, meaning that they're not going to be actually constructing new infrastructure, we are only a commenting agency. And so all safety analysis and reviews and recommendations go to that lead agency, and it's to the discretion of that lead agency if they will actually condition a project for those recommendations. So if there's not an encroachment permit coming in for that development to actually do work, we don't really have a hammer to enforce the lead agency to do any of our safety recommendations. So we have to really be on due diligence to show that lead agency the data and show them why the recommendations that we're making are needed for this development before they approve that. So, and as a responsible agency, again, that's only where we may have a direct impact. So the total development is actually happening on our facility. So that could be an overcrossing or something like that going over our facility, where we would have more of a role in that as compared to just adding trips or traffic to our facility. So, and with that, CEQA aligns with Caltrans' mission statement, which is basically to provide a safe, sustainable, and integrated and efficient transportation system. But it also, in that, we want to make sure that the road users have a safe transportation system, but we need to be able to show that in some format that is data-driven and has some backing to it from a science perspective. So in our past practice, LD/IGR reviews primarily resulted from developers doing a lot of the analysis and providing that to the lead agency, and then that lead agency would submit that to Caltrans for review. And a lot of times this created some contention about how numbers were generated, what kind of impacts were going to be the project. And safety is kind of a part of that review process, meaning that we were looking at more congestion management, maintaining levels of service, and any improvements we would make would necessarily be a direct result of that, but safety improvements may be a part of that congestion relief process. Our new practice basically adds Caltrans safety staff in that formal review process. So we've taken the responsibility to do that review process for that developer, and then make recommendations based on our analysis back to the lead agency for that. This creates a new process, but it also allows us to make sure that the data we have, which is our collision database that we maintain, and our safety experience and expertise, is in the process of making recommendations back for these developments before they actually get constructed. So what constitutes a review is to be reviewed? Basically, we may include, but are not limited to adding new automobiles, bicycle, or pedestrian trips to our state highways, modifying access in any way to the state highway, and affecting the safety of connections to or travel on state roadways are primarily things that we would be interested in reviewing from that development. From a safety perspective, we know that collisions are indicators of safety performance, but we also know that there's a difference between the objective and subjective safety concepts. And that collisions are relatively rare and random events, but we can create patterns through science and good data analysis. We also know that collisions are the result of events and conditions converging at the same time, but we also realize that design, exposure, or operations of our facilities can have an impact on safety performance, either for the better, or if not managed correctly, can decrease that safety performance as well. We also realize that the cross-estimation methods are limited but evolving, and the Highway Safety Manual is one of those processes that is an evolving process that we're going to be incorporating into our review process, because it is very data-driven and has a lot of science backing to it, and it makes it easier for us to present that to a lead agency and to a community if needed, to explain why we're making certain recommendations for projects. And a variety of objective safety performance metrics can be available for the safety staff to choose from as recommendations in a review process. We also want to be able to identify and mitigate existing and future safety for performance of a project, and the Highway Safety Manual and CMFs allow us to do that with a given outlined process. And we want to make sure that we're outlining and achieving a greater inter-organizational consistency, meaning that statewide, we are providing a consistent method to review projects and a consistent method to make recommendations based on factors that we can actually point to and say, this is why we're asking you to do this improvement or a recommended improvement for your development. We also want to realize that risk factors from systemic safety analysis and local road safety plans can help with localized traffic impact studies. And that if we have statewide safety performance targets that are in our statewide highway safety plan, or SHSP, that we're meeting those goals as well through local development. And we're also providing safe access, which we know is good for businesses and public in general. And I think those concepts are things that lead agencies and developers can all buy into. Nobody wants to be at the back end of safety saying that we didn't provide for a safe facility that they're going to be developing. So into the next part of this is how do we get into selecting locations at all first to analyze as part of the LDIGR process? Well, we set up kind of some strict criteria based on our current government process of being pro-housing and wanting to move forward with development of how we're going to actually select locations for review in this process. So we're using our current network screening processes. We have table Cs and monitoring programs that actually use data and statistics to select high collision locations throughout our state. And we also have the ability in our program to compare like facilities or locations and determine if those locations are higher than our statewide average compared to other similar locations. So the first process or point of this process is that it has to have one of those triggers within that land use development. So if a developer comes to us and says, we're going to construct something, we're going to look at where those access points are going to be, and then we're going to review our own data and say, okay, is this location or these locations or intersections triggering on one of our location monitoring programs? And that would be our initial step to take a more active role in looking at that development and what impacts it may have on our facility. If it doesn't meet one of these criteria, then it becomes very difficult for us to go to a lead agency and say, hey, we want to make recommendations based on a prediction where there's already not an accident or a crash or collision history existing at those locations. Second, the safety staff in Caltrans will classify locations for improvements. So once we've got that first trigger, then we can go to that project and see where the locations are that they're going to be impacted. We can do an investigation of the collisions that are occurring, and then we can use processes like the Highway Safety Manual, given the data that we have, to actually look at predictions and see what maybe an increase in collision patterns based on that development, and then also what kind of recommendations that we can make for that developer once the project is constructed. One key factor, though, is that we have to tie a significant portion of the increase in collisions to that development. So if those collisions would naturally occur outside of that development happening or not, we cannot condition a project in the state of California to do those improvements. So those are improvements that we would have to make ourselves as a state agency. And sometimes that may be in combination with the development, and sometimes it may be separately. So once that's done, some criteria as previous. So the project plan specific plan, which will not apply unless a project plan is built, again, as part of that process, and should be data-based and able to document projects impacted the location. So if we can't document that process, we can't make recommendations for that development. But if we can, and we can show that increase in volume will generate a certain type of traffic collision patterns, and we can use the Highway Safety Manual process to do that, then we can look at countermeasures and how we'll use CMFs to do that. So in general, I'm just going to go through a brief case study recently that we've used this process on. So we had a suburban land use project on US Highway 101. And basically, it's a two-lane conventional highway with about 12,800 ADT. The minor road had about 5,200 ADT. And a proposed Starbucks coffee shop was being proposed at the corner access point. They were going to have access both off the minor road and off the state highway. And we're going to be generating a significant number of left turn in and outs. If anybody's ever visited a Starbucks, you can know that they have a significant amount of traffic during peak periods. And this can really create a lot of different issues on our local roads and on the highways as well. So in this case, we did the analysis and review. This location had some collision history in the past, but obviously we knew with the Starbucks going in there, this was going to be another concern. The developer wasn't proposing any improvements on the state highway or the local road except for their access points. And this is typical. Developers don't want to spend more money than they need to on projects, and they're really concerned about getting their project in and their own internal circulation, and not really much about what's going to be happening off the network. So our safety staff reviewed the location and proposed, basically the facility had two wide lanes on it, so there was ample room to restripe the facility and remove a little bit of parking in the area, where we could add a two-way left turn lane on the approach and add a left turn lane on both approaches of the major leg of the highway. And we may be funding one of those approaches, but we were asking the developer to fund restriping of at least the leg on their approach to the intersection, since we knew that there was going to be a significant amount of people turning left into and out of that driveway access on Highway 101. And we wanted to be able to accommodate those moves and reduce any collision patterns that may be coming from that. So we used the CMF Clearinghouse and went through and reviewed those and selected two different CMFs. One was a two-way left turn lane, and then that two-way left turn lane would go into the left turn lane at the intersection. And so these are the values that we came up with and we're using based on some analysis that we had done. And with that, you can see here with this suburban land use project, the existing conditions basically, and I break out the segments and the intersections differently. So the segment would include the portion with the two-way left turn lane. The intersection would include the left turn lane itself. But the existing condition basically just had a few collision patterns happening, and you can see those up here with the segment. We had a total of 3, and the intersection there was a total of 1. And I broke those out so you could see the left turn for the driveway, the left turn for the intersection, and also the rear ends for the segment, which would include basically the section on the state highway where the left turns would be making in and out of the project driveway. Doing some predictive analysis through the highway safety manual and reviewing also patterns of similar locations where we've had Starbucks go in on similar highways before. We were able to do some predictive analysis of what that inclusion increase would be once the project improvement occurred. And so you can see here there's a significant increase in those numbers for that project. We were seeing a lot more collisions for the driveway access point and also for the intersection as well, based on the significant amount of turning movements that were going to be made. In this case, there may be other collision patterns that were occurring at those locations, but for the purposes of trying to make recommendations for land use development, we can only look at collisions that are basically tied directly to that improvement. So to do that, we were only looking at those specific locations and types of collisions that we knew would be referenced back to that project development. Applying the CMFs for both the left turn at the driveway and the left turn at the intersection, we were able to take those reductions and show that we could actually get about a reduction of 8 collisions by having the developer fund and restripe basically the section of highway to provide the two-way left turn lane and the left turn pocket or turning movement for that facility. So again, this is a relatively low-cost improvement. For us, it's considered a low-cost safety measure that can easily be done within the existing footprint of the roadway. And it's easy for us to go back and show a developer that, hey, with a little bit of extra money of restriping a facility to provide for these turning movements, your project is going to potentially be generating this much more collision history, and we can get some predicted improvement within those collision patterns by just doing these improvements at that location. What this allows us to do is then go back and show that to the lead agency and say, hey, we're making these recommendations for a purpose and a reason. This is the data that we have to support those decisions. This then again makes the lead agency more comfortable with doing those recommendations or making those recommendations as part of that conditioning for that project. And it also protects the lead agency and the state from potential tort claims. By addressing safety concerns and showing that we're making a reduction in what we know is going to happen, we can actually reduce that potential for litigation later on in that process. So this is how we're using CMFs. This is a fairly new process for us, but we anticipate that this will become more of a norm as we develop our program and continue to start doing reviews under this process with the Highway Safety Manual and using the CMF database and those factors that are in that to actually use this for land use development and show that we can actually increase safety in a logical and scientific based method. So with that concludes my presentation, and we can answer any questions at the end of the presentation. So
great, thank you, Troy. That was an excellent presentation. It's exciting to see how Caltrans has elevated safety not only at the agency level but at the project level as well.
thank you.
And so we wanted to, I guess, hear from you guys about if you have conducted safety analysis using CMFs as part of traffic impact analyses in your state or jurisdiction. And so you should be seeing a poll right now that asks that question, and you can respond yes, no, or maybe you're not sure. So we'll just give it another second. And Kelly, maybe you can summarize what we're seeing here.
So it looks like 43% have conducted safety analysis, 43% have not, and 15% are not sure.
Okay, 43% though that said yes. That's great. Okay, so then we have, I guess, on the other side, for those of you that are here representing governmental agencies, does your agency require safety analysis, including CMFs, in traffic impact analysis? So similar to what Troy just walked through for Caltrans, does your agency have similar requirements? Yes, no, maybe you're not sure, or maybe you're not government, so this wouldn't apply to you. Okay, Kelly, you want to summarize what we're seeing here?
We have 46 not government, but of those that are, we have 14% who said yes, 23% who said no, and 17% who said not sure.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. That's good to know. This seems to be an evolving area where we're seeing more use of data-driven safety analysis. So that's good. Thank you for responding to that poll question. And then for those of you that want to learn more about how you can incorporate data-driven safety analysis into traffic impact analysis, Federal Highway has produced a how-to guide. And that resource is available on our website. It walks through the different opportunities to integrate DDSA into traffic impact analysis, and also includes a case study very similar to what Troy walked us through today. So I would encourage you to take a look at this resource to see what additional opportunities might be out there for you and your agency. So thank you again, Troy. And now we're going to turn the presentation over to Srini to talk about how TxDOT is using, or how TCI is helping TxDOT and how they're using CMFs for HSIP.
Thanks, Karen. So I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's almost good afternoon in the Pacific time too. I'm Srinivas Jittipalli. I'm an associate research engineer in the Center for Transportation Safety at TTI. Today, I'll be presenting on the topic updating TxDOT work codes. I'll explain what the work code mean, but basically how we are using CMFs from the CMF Clearinghouse to update those work codes. So what are work codes? It's Texas version of CMFs. So it's just the CMF, but we do in a different way. So this is a table, a work code table. It's one of the work codes that are used in the HSIP project selection. So every district, when they submit, they need to use these reduction factors. That's how they are rated. So, for example, this 102 is install stop signs. So the reduction factor, it's a CRF, so which is 1 minus CMF. And then we have the preventable crash here, which are target crash types. This is how the work code table looks like. Now, there are different types of work codes that we have in Texas. So 5 different categories. So again, it's a link to online manuals, TxDOT, if you're interested, or you can just type TxDOT work code table online in Google, then you will see all this. So once you click on those, we will have a list that falls under each of these categories. So now what we did was recently, I mean, these work code tables, they were developed a few years ago or a few decades ago, even before I joined TTI. So recently, with the time, those needs to be updated. So through an interagency contract, TxDOT asked us to, update some of the work codes because there are so many. So we wanted to prioritize a few work codes and then update them. So basically, we followed like 4-step procedure in it to update the work codes. The first one is review of literature. So first, what we did was we just went into CMF Clearinghouse for the treatment of interest to us. And then once we get the CMFs, again, to get more details, we then followed the journal papers and project reports as well. And that once we get, then we did a quality check. Again, as Taha explained, so higher star quality, soundness of the methodology, if it's related to the crash type we are interested or not, all those things, we did it. And then once we have, and as you all know, each treatment will have like multiple CMFs, different studies develop different CMFs. So for that, we want to estimate a single value for that particular CMF. So we did meta-analysis. And after that, what we did was the single value that we got, should we keep should we recommend the newer CMF or should we keep the older one? So we did confidence interval, which I'll show you in the next few slides. And then we just recommended TxDOT that you can keep a particular CMF work code or whether they need to update it. So this is the pictorial view. Again, the first one on the left, the top left, again, review of literature and collect CMFs. And then the middle one, we did the quality check and pre-selection. Again, star rating is what we generally used. We only consider the CMFs that are high star rating. And then as you can see, these red circles on the right, top right, these are different studies. So as you can see, they fall everywhere because some studies find that it's highly effective. Some studies find no, they are not. Some marginal and so on. So when we have these multiple CMFs, then we need to do a meta-analysis. And we did that meta-analysis and then came up with the confidence interval. So the middle line, the right bottom, that's a single CMF, and then this is the confidence interval. So when we go the left side there, you can see 2 red circles on the normal distribution there. The top one, it's within that 95% confidence interval. So if it is that way, then we said, okay, keep whatever you currently have. You don't need to update it. If it falls outside, the existing work code falls outside the confidence interval, then we suggested, okay, take out the existing workout and update it with the new CMF that we are proposing. So this is just an example I'll show to you all. So the treatment here is converting minor road stop to always stop control. Okay. So then the work code number, TxDOT work code table, it's 121. As you can see here, the reduction percentage is 15, which means the CMF is 0.85. So for that, we got multiple studies, and again, we went into CMF Clearinghouse, and you can see here, just an example, we are showing 3 studies here. The different issues. So the one that 1986 study, their crash type, their target crash type is angle, whereas the other 2, it's all crash types. Again, you see there is a lot of difference in the CMFs. They got Harwood, they got 0.52, whereas the other study in 2020 got 3.1. So again, we tried to do this quality check before even we conducted the meta-analysis. So once we have those CMFs for the crash type that we are interested in, we did the meta-analysis with this is the equation. So what we do is we consider the CMF and as well as the standard error of the CMF. So that's why we go to the reports and journal papers and we see what standard errors they had there. So once we have, we use this equation, and this is the single one, and this is the single CMF, the estimate 0.37, and this is the standard error, the combined standard error. So based on it, so 0.37, 0.2, and the confidence interval, it goes from 0.34 to 0.40. Okay, now the existing one, the work code table had 0.85, whereas the confidence interval that we got is 0.34 to 0.4, which means the one, it doesn't fall in the confidence interval, which means we recommended updating the existing one. So because the one that we got is 0.37, the CRF will be 63. So from 15% reduction factor, we recommended going to 63%. So this is what we did, the approach. That's how we use the CMF Clearinghouse, to update many of this work codes that we currently have. So again, I'll just show you. We chose like 3 different topic areas: intersection, pedestrian, and the roadway departure, because those 3 are our emphasis areas in the strategic highway safety plan. So what we did was we selected like top 15, 20 in each of the category, and we primarily focused on the low cost countermeasures. So again, I'm just showing as an example here. So see the last column here, recommended CMF. So when we say no change, that means the existing one is good enough. The one that is without no change, that means we recommended changing that CMF. Same way we did for the roadway departure. Again, you can see no change versus changes. Again, it's a partial list. We did more than 20 in this category as well. And then the last category that we focused was the pedestrian safety. Again, the same way, we either recommended changing or, or no change, keep the existing one. Now, that's the first part. What the second part is, we wanted to do the combination of work codes. So as many of you know, when they treat, it's not just a single treatment all the time, but multiple treatments are treated, are applied at the same time. So now HSM or the existing methodology is to assume independence, and we just multiply the CMFs to get the combined effect. So there are some problems with it, so which I will be discussing here now. So again, there are multiple CMFs that are being used in the HSIP process. And then again, the applicable crashes or the preventable or the target crashes that vary by the work code. Again, they may not be the same always, or most of the time they are not the same. So how would we do that? So this is a simple Venn diagram that shows. So let's say there is a treatment A, and then there is a treatment B. Light blue is treatment A. So if we just apply A, then there will be a 20 crash reduction, 19 plus 1 out of 100 crashes as an example. And then if you just apply B, then it's a 5 crash reduction. So again, you see CMF of A is 1 minus 20 divided by 100, which is 0.8. And CMF of B, it's 1 minus, because 5 crashes, it's 0.95. Now, the independence assumption, again, be very careful. The word independence has a different meaning in statistical terms. So again, when we think about independence, we think that they should not overlap at all. But again, statistically, they can. A partial overlap is fine. And so as you can see here, when we multiply those two CMF, the combined CMF is 0.76. And when you just do a raw calculation, 1 minus 19 plus 1 plus 4, it's the same. So when A and B are independent, you can do the multiplication of the CMFs. Again, this is what we commonly assume, but again, that will not hold true always. These are two other issues. So for example, one CMF Z is a subset of W. So which means if you apply Z 24, there will be a reduction of 24 crashes. But if you do W, then it will be a reduction of 25, and 24 is the subset of it. And the other extreme case, this is one extreme case where one treatment is just a subset of the other treatment. And the other cases, they are totally separate, uncommon treatments. Now, the bottom calculations, if you see here, if you do independence, assuming the independence assumption, if you do, the combined CMF that you get is 0.57, whereas actually the combined CMF is just 0.75. So it's not equal when you have this kind of treatments. And similarly, when you have these two uncommon ones, so when we assume the independence, then it's 0.765, whereas if you do the raw calculations, it's 0.75. Again, they are different. So we proposed a new methodology for combining the CMFs. So again, what we did was, instead of just assuming independence between the treatments, what we said was, you have to take a look at overlapping crash types, the preventable crash types that are common to both treatments, one in green and one in yellow. I think this is light green. As you all know, all men are colorblind. I am too. So I don't know if this is dark yellow or light green, but it's some different color. It's a combination of green and yellow. So again, our methodology is based on the independence assumption as well as the other extreme cases. So what we proposed was, so the combined CMF is the weighted average of these three regions. So basically what we are recommending is, we need to check the crash data and see how many, what proportion of the crashes fall in the green region versus yellow region versus this light green region. So again, this is a plot. These green line and red line are the extreme cases. One, it's like one is the subset of the other, and the other assumes that they are completely independent or separate from each other. So for example, there are two treatments that we are applying. See, treatment X and treatment Y. So let's assume the treatment X CMF is 0.6 and CMF Y is also 0.6. So by independence assumption, it's 0.6 times 0.6. It's the blue line you see here, it's 0.36, which is the independence assumption. But now, if one is the subset of the other, let's assume that Y is a subset of X, then actually your combined CMF is just 0.6, which means you will only see a 40% reduction in crashes, whether you apply X or Y or both. At the same time, if they are completely separate from each other, you would see a CMF of 0.2, which is 80% reduction. So again, this one falls in the middle, but when we take the weighted average, the dotted line is what we are proposing. And always the proposed methodology, the estimate that we get with this methodology is always a conservative estimate. So for example, you see here independence, it says 0.36, which is a 64% reduction in crashes. But with this one, it's 0.48, which is only 52% reduction in crashes. So what we are recommending is, instead of using independence all the time, you must account for the crash type, the subset of crashes that each treatment is reducing the crashes. So I'll show you an example here again. So most of the time, based on your experiences too, these two are done together, like texturing the shoulders and texturing the center line. So the reduction factor in our work code table, TxDOT work code table, it's 15% with textured shoulders, and a 26% reduction using the center line texturing, which means the CMF is 0.85 in 532 case, and 542 it's 0.74. Also note the preventable crash here, they are different. I mean, there is a subset. So vehicle movement or manner of collision 30, which means head-on. So head-on is common in both of them, whereas you see 21 here for centerline texturing, 21 is the side swipe in same direction. And then we have roadway related, it's common, like 2 or 3 are common in both of them, but 4 we have, so shoulder influences 4 also. It's what we have in there. So again, if we assume that they both are independent, the combined CMF is 0.63, which means there will be a 37% reduction in crashes. Now, with our methodology, this is for just the applicable crashes. When we apply the proportions from the crash data, you see it's 28% only, the reduction in crashes, versus 37 we got with the independence assumption. So again, this methodology considers both the independence assumption and also they're unrelated. So the left one here, the Venn diagram shows for just the preventable crashes, versus the right one is for the total crashes, because the crashes that are applicable for this treatment is about 50%. So that's why there will be a 28% reduction in the applicable crashes, which is equivalent to 14% reduction in total crashes. So that's it. This is how we are using the CMFs from the CMF Clearinghouse into our TxDOT work code tables, updating those work code tables, and we are planning to update more work codes in future years. This was done last year. So thank you, CMF Clearinghouse first, and thank you all for attending the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Srini. That was a great presentation. I think it's always interesting to see how states develop and update their state-specific CMF lists. And I know more and more states are starting to do that. And so we have another poll question here for you, looking to, I guess, to get a better understanding of if your state has a state-specific CMF list. And again, the answers here are yes, no, or I don't know.
Looks like we have 40% yes, 26% no, and 34% don't know.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. So that's good. As I said, I think we're seeing more and more states begin to develop that state-specific CMF list, especially as the number of CMFs in the clearinghouse keep growing. I think it's helpful to have that one list of CMFs for agencies to use when they're preparing funding applications, to make sure that it's a fair competition across all applications and everybody's using the same values for the expected reductions in crashes. If you're not sure if your state has a list, we do maintain a list of the state's CMF list that we're aware of on the CMF Clearinghouse website. We have about 20 state CMF lists linked from the Clearinghouse website, as shown here. And so if you're a state and you have an updated list that you'd like us to post here, please send that to me and we'll get that updated and posted to the Clearinghouse website as soon as possible. So thank you again, Srini. And I think now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to see what kind of questions we have in the chat pod.
So Karen, I'll take all the question session. We have a few questions, so I'll try to go to select a few of them, most common ones. We can answer them for now, and the remaining ones, we'll, as usual, guys, we will answer them and have them posted to the website. So one of the first questions we received today was, do we receive a copy of the presentations? And the answer to that is yes. After the webinar, we will be posting the PowerPoints along with the video recording of the webinar on the CMF Clearinghouse website. So yes, you can always go back to the website and download the presentations and also view the video recording of this webinar. Let's see some other questions. So we have one more question here that says, what is the difference between the CMFs in the clearinghouse and the CMFs in Part D of HSM? Karen, do you want to answer this or do you want me to go ahead?
You can go ahead, Taha.
Perfect. So guys, the CMFs that are recorded in Part D of the HSM, we do record those CMFs in the clearinghouse as well. Now, one thing you have to understand is that the first edition of Highway Safety Manual came out in 2010. So a lot of CMFs that are included in the Highway Safety Manual are based out of studies that were conducted prior to 2010. The CMF Clearinghouse, we update it every quarter, every year. So it's a more updated and up-to-date list of CMFs, that you can search and use. So there's no difference. The CMFs in Part D of the HSM are also included in the CMF Clearinghouse, and we identified them. If you go into the details page, as there's a section that says available in Highway Safety Manual, and it should say the yes or no. So you can easily identify the Part D CMFs, of the HSM in the clearinghouse as well.
So Taha, basically it's the subset, right? The HSM is a subset. Perfect.
Yes, shooting that. So one other question we get here is, do you have an API for query using code? So API is a new thing, guys. We have a data download API that was included on the clearinghouse, and I think it was within the last year. So we don't have you cannot query using code, but but you were able to go into the data download API link on the clearinghouse website, and you can download the data dictionary along with the data in both Excel and XML formats. I hope that answers the question. We cannot query using a code, but you can download the database and the data dictionary from the website. Let's move over. Maybe Troy, there's a question for you. It says, what is CEQA?
Yeah, that's the California Environmental Quality Act.
Beautiful. And also, Troy, there's the second question here. For your safety review in the TIA process, who is approved to do the safety reviews? Is it only the state staff, local staff, consultants? And if it is not state staff, do you require any kind of certification or qualifications?
Yeah, so it's specifically the task is assigned to our district traffic safety staff who do traffic safety investigations for the state based on high collision concentration locations. So they're considered our expert staff within state engineering. And so they're doing the reviews and making the recommendations back to the local government and the developer. So we've taken that role away from the developer and moved it into the state and had them do the reviews and recommendations.
Perfect. And also, Troy, there's one more question. I think that's based on the example you showed. How did you estimate the number of collisions for the no improvement scenario?
Yeah, so we used the software in the Highway Safety Manual for Part D analysis, and then applied the CMFs to that. So we basically had the collision data that was existing, and then we compared that with our own data that we had in our system with similar locations based on previous developments of Starbucks coffee shops on similar highways to make sure that data was somewhat consistent. Since the HSM process doesn't necessarily account for California data specifically, we want to make sure we're matching up that data so that it's consistent and can be documented.
Perfect, Troy. And also Rashini, we have a question for you. It says, what is the reason that the information related to a work code is limited to maintenance costs? Are information about investment costs not relevant?
Sorry, it's not clear. Can you repeat the question again?
Sure. The question says, what is the reason that the information related to a work code is limited only to maintenance costs? And whether information about investment costs is relevant in the process?
So I'm not really familiar with how the HSIP selection TxDOT does. But I think they have the cost of the treatment as well when they evaluate the P by C, the benefit to cost ratio. So they consider both the maintenance and as well as the cost of the treatment. But again, I don't know for sure.
Okay. So Karen, I think with 5 minutes remaining, maybe we can take a few more questions that were regarding the rating transition, and then we can move over to a wrap up. So one of the questions is, could you elaborate on the requirements for the studies under the new rating system? So for the requirements, guys, once we do the transition, we will have the detailed rating criteria posted on the Clearinghouse website, where you can see exactly, what are the multiple level of factors, for each category that are being rated at. And you can, then see what are the requirements for the studies to get those certain number of points to get to high star ratings. And also with respect to the rating transition, there was another question. How will the new CMF rating system complement the revised HSM? And the second part of this question, which says, will the CMFs included in the new HSM get special treatment using the new system? So when you say about how will this new CMF rating system complement the revised HSM, so this new rating system, it's following, it's been, we are transitioning to it to make sure that we are consistent with the CMF rating inclusion criteria for the second edition of the Highway Safety Manual. So it will pretty much be the same. Now, when you say which will CMFs included in the new HSM get special treatment using the new system, I'm not sure what you mean exactly. If it means that would CMFs in the clearinghouse still be identified as being included in the Highway Safety Manual? I would say we don't have an answer yet of how we would communicate that to users, but the one way or the other, there should be something in the clearinghouse to identify CMFs that are HSM2 worthy. And with that, Karen, I think we have 3 more minutes remaining, so if it might be better for you to go with the wrap-up slides. And guys, for all the remaining questions, we will try to have a document with all the questions and answers and upload that to the Clearinghouse along with the presentations and the video of the webinar as well. So Karen, can you take over now?
Yes, are you still seeing my screen?
Karen, you can go ahead.
Okay. All right, so moving forward, I think you can guess that the biggest thing for us is this rating transition that Taha talked about today. So you'll be hearing more from us. It will be providing further details on the transition timeline and other aspects of that transition in the coming months. So I would encourage you to continue to check the Changes Ahead page for up-to-date information. If you are on the CMF Clearinghouse mailing list, will likely be pushing information out to you through that listserv as well. So just keep your eye out for additional information about that transition. One other thing that we're working on is we maintain a summary of state SPF calibration and development efforts on the CMF Clearinghouse under the Other Resources tab, I think is what it's called. And the last time that spreadsheet was updated was in 2017, I think. And so we know that there's been a lot of SPF development work in the states over the past couple of years. And so we would like to update that spreadsheet so it's more current. So I would encourage the states that are participating today to review that spreadsheet and let us know if there are additional SPFs that have been developed and that we can include in that spreadsheet. I know many folks are interested to see, what other states are up to, what the calibration factors look like, and those sorts of things. So if you have any information to share, please let us know. I also wanted to mention that we have some additional resources available to you on our website. So we host this type of webinar once a year. We also have some roadway safety analysis videos related to CMFs on the website. There's one on the application of CMFs, and there's a 2-part series on the application of CMFs for multiple countermeasures, also similar to what Srini talked about in the latter part of his presentation. We also have training courses available through the National Highway Institute. We just got through offering each of these training courses this past fall, one on the application of CMFs, one on the science of CMFs, and another on developing quality CMFs. And so these courses will likely be offered again in the near future. And so we typically try to advertise those out through the Clearinghouse website and listserv. So keep an eye out for additional information about when those courses will be offered. And more information about each of these resources is available on the Clearinghouse website under the Using CMFs tab. And then just a couple of wrap-up items. When you exit the webinar today, a brief survey will load. We would very much appreciate your feedback on our performance. We listen to what you have to say and use that as we prepare for future year webinars. So please take some time to complete that webinar. We want to make sure that we are giving you what you need in these annual webinars and through the CMF Clearinghouse. And then lastly, following today's webinar, you will receive a follow-up email. This email will include a link to download a printable certificate of attendance for 1.5 hours of professional development instruction. If there are multiple attendees at your site, and I think we heard at the beginning that there were a few of you that had multiple attendees, you please feel free to forward this link to the other participants so that they can download and print the certificate with their name as well. And lastly, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. If I don't know the answer, I will certainly get you to the right person that can help you. I wanted to thank Taha, Troy, and Srini for their presentations today, as well as all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us and learn a little bit more about CMFs and the CMF Clearinghouse. Thank you all and have a great day.